So a month ago or so, I bought a goat, took it home, and then I slaughtered the goat and I offered it up to the gods of mobile as a burnt offering, begging them to bring another mobile expert to The Verge. And a couple weeks ago, Dan Seifert joined the team. Coincidence? Who can say? Stay tuned for the Verge Mobile Show. Hi, I'm Dieter Bohn.
I'm Dan Seifert.
Yeah, I'm Chris Ziegler.
And I am the voice of Vlad Savov.
Oh my God, he's here. We have been trying to get Vlad connected to us for some time now. He is live from IFA in Berlin. And how is it there, Vlad?
It is nice and not sunny anymore. It's night now, but it's lovely. The people are lovely. It's a beautiful city. And I'm enjoying it apart from the really ghetto web connection that I have right now. Otherwise, it's lovely.
Yeah, you sound remarkably unrobot-like.
What's really odd to me is that Berlin is supposed to be basically the San Francisco of Europe, right? A lot of startups there. You would assume that the web connectivity would be absolutely fantastic everywhere you go there.
Apart from the hotels. And I'm in a hotel. So what can I do about that?
Right.
You know, I've got a MiFi here. I've basically got it taped to the window so it can maximize its connectivity. Who knows how long I will last, but you know, as a voice and as a still picture in this otherwise video podcast, I will do my utmost.
So we're missing a golden opportunity here to haze Dan, who is with us for the first time, and I think there's no better way to do that than to just say, "Hey Dan, how's it going? What's new?"
It's going well. I think we got.
Man, you could have done a lot better with that.
You know, I could have, and you really put me on the spot there. So,
well, he's already done 90 seconds on The Verge, so
That's right.
I kind of feel like he's already over that hump, so to speak. This is kind of the easy part. This is cake compared to the nightmarish hell that Ross
and I just want to
Miller, puts
say,
you through.
you know, for the people that watched the 90 seconds on The Verge that I was actually on, I am wearing a shirt that fits this time. So, you know, nobody needs to take offense or avert their eyes because of a shirt that might not fit.
Oh, you can always get somebody to take
throwing
offense.
that out there.
Yeah,
You can always get
commenters
somebody to take
are
offense, I promise.
they're pretty brutal when it comes to our wardrobes. I gotta say. Yeah, is that a tie
They
you're
are.
wearing?
Yeah, that's a little tie.
Man, that's amazing.
Great.
That's you're way too
I'm
formal
wearing-
for the mobile show.
I was about to say I'm wearing a tuxedo, but then I realized that I'm on camera, so I can't really lie about that. But yeah, this is very exciting. So for those of you who don't know, all of you should know at this point, but Dan Seifert is a very, very new addition to The Verge, and we are very excited to have him aboard. And I suspect, this is an early prediction, but I suspect you're going to be seeing and hearing a lot of him on this program going forward. I think that's a safe assumption.
Well, we'll
right?
see how he does. Yeah, no, I mean, if he totally bombs, then he's out, obviously.
Right. Well, yeah.
We have a
of
pretty
course,
high bar here.
Yeah,
you need to be able to string more
no
words
pressure
together.
here at all.
Yeah, no pressure. Also, Dieter, I just want to go back to your open because that was, I mean, you've done some disturbing opens, but that really takes the cake. And I'm a little emotionally scarred right now. And frankly, I don't know if I can continue. I might just
I would
leave.
like to add that I had no idea that was coming either. I mean, I saw the notes for it in our notes, and I had no idea he was going that direction.
Yeah, so just to give our listeners an idea of what's going on, we're looking at our show notes here, and it just says Verge Mobile Show, episode 14, cold open, goat sacrifice. And I didn't think to question Dieter, what the heck does that mean? I let him roll with it, and I come to find out that he was actually going to talk about buying and slaughtering a goat in the hopes that Dan Seifert would join. That was unexpected. So
I would also like to say that no animals were
what-
harmed in the making of.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
yeah.
It turns out that sometimes these opening stories aren't actually technically true. I didn't literally buy a goat. I only metaphorically bought a goat and made a burnt offering of it to the gods of mobile. By the way, gods of mobile would make a sweet superhero movie. we think we've talked about this before. We should talk about IFA because Vlad's here on a tenuous and risky connection, and we should use it while we can. So I guess the big news so far is LG. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. Of what we know.
Well, I mean, actually, I think it's premature to talk about IFA by exactly one day. So if we're conducting this podcast tomorrow, it will be a really fascinating breakdown of the comings and goings, the movers and the shakers. But today is just like LG announced the Optimus G, which is not an IFA, at least not yet. Jeff Blagden over in Japan, he went to the Entity Docomo launch event for this device and managed to get some hands-on time with it. But our dedicated...
They're seriously not there at IFA?
I don't know if they will have the phone here. I don't actually know that for myself. I mean, my conversations with LG have actually led me to believe that it wouldn't be launched yet. It wouldn't be launched at IFA. I expected it to be launched a little later on, but there you go. That just how far you can take, how far you can trust your communications with PR people, I guess. But yeah, I mean, look, if it's at IFA, it will be found, it will be videoed, and it will be sniffed and touched and tasted.
No, please don't sniff it.
Jeff is a pretty... Don't sniff the phone, but lick it.
Don't sniff the phone. You can touch it. You can look at it. You can take video of it. Don't use any of your other senses. Don't taste it. Don't sniff it. I implore you, unless you want to come down with some diseases that you can't pronounce.
There have been phones that have smelled bad. I will point that out. There are certain manufacturers where they don't get all the glue out before they ship it, and so it just smells terrible coming out of the box.
Well, a really good example of that is a Nexus S when you whip out the battery before switching it off and then stick it back in. It's a very consistent, unpleasant smell. But anyway, I reject Chris's absolutism about don't sniff the phone. I shall do whatever comes naturally with a plank of completely unnatural
it's your funeral.
Technology.
Vlad, it's your funeral, and frankly, we have Dan lined up as a perfectly suitable replacement for when you die. So
I know. We are already there. I'm already a ghostly presence as it is. You guys are probably posting a picture of a clown while I speak. Or in the absence of a clown, myself with no clothes on. Same thing. Anyway, so yeah, the news of IFA is coming. It's not with us yet, but as far as we're concerned, the Korean companies, they've done their usual thing of pre-announcing things. So we know there's the LG Optimus G, the 4.7-inch device, and we know that Samsung is going to launch the Galaxy Note 2. So those are the two big standouts from Korea, and we should get our hands on both tomorrow, basically.
I don't know. The Optimus 2X was just not an impressive phone to me. So whenever... LG, this is not the first time that LG has made a point of trying to jump out ahead of the competition and, trying to make a big splash with a flagship device. And they just, in the past, they have not, in my mind, delivered. The Optimus Black was not an impressive device. The 2X sucked. I had a G2X, and it was not a good phone. So we'll see.
I'm optimistic a little bit, only because the 4X HD was impressive, at least. I mean, it's not quite up to the bar of, say, what Samsung's been producing or even HTC, but it was a marked departure from the really ho-hum phones that were coming in 2011, 2010, etc.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
The really interesting thing about
I'm totally ready to have this thing break my heart. Like, I like the design. It's just a big, unapologetic slab of powerful smartphone awesomeness as far as the specs are concerned. Like there's no adornments. Like the corners are barely curved. They may as well be like 90 degrees straight, sharp corners. It's just, a glossy black slab with a screen on it. The only real complaint I have is that it's super glossy.
I was going to say, don't speak too quickly about liking its design, because from the front, absolutely agree with you. It's really severe looking, which is fun and good for something that is really spec driven. But then you flip it around and there's this glossy back, and it just, it makes you cringe. I don't know why they needed to do that. Why they needed to glitz it up and make it all flashy and all of those things. But the really interesting aspect for me with the Optimus G is that this is the first device from LG that has the famed in-cell touch technology, which we've anticipated will be in an LG display in the next generation iPhone. And this is essentially the same thing that we're seeing from Samsung with the Super AMOLED displays, where they take the capacitive touch element and the display, and they just bond the whole thing together and make the display look like it really is on the surface of the glass. It lets you build thinner displays, which lets you build thinner phones. A point that Chris has been drilling into people for a while. So I mean, obviously the first quad-core Snapdragon S4 is going to be a spectacularly awesome chip. So I mean, the potential is totally there. But then we've also said that a whole bunch of times with LG devices.
Well, the other thing to point out is that it's currently only announced for Korea, right? We don't have, who knows when it's going to come to the U.S., if ever.
Korea and Japan.
I mean, we're just now getting the Optimus View on Verizon as the LG Intuition, which they just have like one of those cages with lots of little bingo balls in it, and they've all got ridiculous names on them, and they just rolled it around and one popped out. What does Intuition have to do with this giant weird 4x3 device? I don't know. But that's a long time from the time that device was announced to it arriving here. And so I'm not really, I'm betting if it does come to the US, it'll be a while. And by the time it does, I don't know if, I'll care as much.
Yeah. Especially for $200 on contract. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I know.
So
I guess
I have a couple questions before we move on. I just want, there are a couple things I just want to say real quick about the Optimus G. So I feel like, and actually about the Snapdragon S4 Pro in particular, because I keep going back to something that was said to Vlad and I at MWC this year when we spoke to ARM, and the gentleman that we spoke to said, this year I'll be using a quad-core A9. This time next year I'll be using a dual-core A15. And at this point, OMAP 5 is right around the corner, right? I would expect before the end of the year we're going to have some OMAP 5 announcements, which I think is widely expected to be the first A15 SoC on the market. Is the S4 Pros, or really is the entire S4 line's reign, with the crate architecture about to come to an end? And what kind of battery characteristics and performance characteristics are we going to see from these quad-core crate chips versus the OMAP 5 and whatever other A15 chips we see over the next few months?
Well, I mean, for me at this point, I'm more concerned with battery life than I am with performance. And if the OMAP can win out on battery life, then I'll switch over. I mean, I've got no problems with the dual core S4. Honestly, I really am not, especially once you get something, close to Jelly Bean on it, like it's just fine.
Right.
Switch, I'm totally convinced that, all these arguments about quad core is a joke and it's not necessary, blah, blah, blah. Like I was convinced as soon as I started using the 1X, and, so, I mean, I'm less worried about, the speed and the power of these things than I am about who's going to win on the battery life front, and especially in a quad-core space. And to me, that's a much more interesting question.
Well, certainly, I think the battery life is definitely an issue. But as devices, we're at 720p devices now. As we move into 1080p devices, we might see some issues with the current dual-core chips pushing those graphics. So I think that's where we might see an advantage on the quad-core end, and then hopefully better battery life with the newer quad-core chips, of course.
Right.
Does that make sense to anybody?
Yeah,
makes sense
no,
to Chris.
I think that's, yeah. It makes total sense to me. Total sense. But my gig for this podcast is that I'm going to believe anything that Dan says.
Cool.
That's my role here.
Chris, I think you have the wrong idea for what hazing means. I think it kind of goes the other way. Which is anything that Dan says, we need to just slam it into the ground and pretend like it's completely wrong. But you know what else?
That would be a more appropriate.
By the way, I want to point out that if you're listening to this later and you're not watching us live, I strongly recommend that you watch the video version of this podcast and not just listen to the audio version, because the images of Vlad that are going up on the site as he speaks are stupendous.
Because if anybody's getting hazed here, I really think it's Vlad and not me, which is hysterical. I
think we might very well make this a new segment or aspect of our show. Just no video feed from Vlad, just pictures. I'll just have to take still pictures during the week.
Biceps after biceps.
Do we want to talk about these rumored Galaxy Note 2 specs? I mean, they're pretty much in line with the stuff that we've heard before, and it's looking like a 5.5-inch screen, and the rest is 1280 by 720, 3G and 4G radios, and a 1.4 gigahertz quad-core Exynos processor. None of that is strikingly different from, sort of where we thought they were headed. So it's probably, we're going to know for really real as soon as Samsung announces it. And I'm the resident, stylus fanatic, but for some reason, maybe it's the fact that we saw the Note 10.1 review from Nilay. I'm just not excited about the Note 2 at all. I wasn't a believer in the original Note, and Samsung proved me wrong by selling millions and millions of them. The Note 2, I have a hard time believing that anybody is waiting for this device.
So the specs are totally believable to me. But there is one thing that I want to point out, which is that we're hearing all this talk. We've talked about it recently on the show. We're hearing all this talk about devices getting this 5-inch LG 1080p display, possibly before the end of the year. I think there were some HTC rumors recently. So that really makes this Galaxy Note 2 potentially look lame pretty fast if it's coming to market with a 5.5-inch 720p at the same time that we're seeing devices with 5-inch 1080p screens on the market. So that's one thing to consider.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm in the same boat as the Eater insofar as, yes, I find the specs perfectly in line with the Galaxy S3 and perfectly in line with what Samsung has churning out of its other vertical companies. So it makes sense in that respect. And I was also in agreement with Dieter when it comes to thinking about the original Galaxy Note. I was here at IFA when the original Galaxy Note launched, and to me it was a case of the Galaxy Tab 7.7 is an amazing device, and this Galaxy Note thing is a gimmick. And I was like, okay, they're really trying to push the Note on us, but the Tab 7.7 is the thing that I find exciting and interesting. So the first thing to say is Samsung Mobile Unpacked tomorrow need not only be about the Galaxy Note 2. There may be other devices that we just completely not heard about. That's one thing. The second, though, is that evidently whatever market there is for these notes is, terrible pun coming up. I apologize in advance, but it's not striking the right note with us, but it is with a whole bunch of other people. And my only theory is if you look at 7-inch tablets, like the original Galaxy Tab, if you look at the Nexus 7, and then consider shrinking that down to 5.3, 5.5 inches, the Note form factor, maybe that makes sense to people. Whereas all of us just keep considering the Note in terms of expanding a smartphone up. Whereas if you think of a 7-inch tablet, which is kind of a one-hand device, and then shrink it down, stick a stylus on it, maybe that's the appeal for other people.
I took that argument, or I looked at that argument when the Note first came out, and the problem that I came up with was the Nexus 7 runs tablet software with tablet apps. The Note does not. The Note runs phone software with phone apps, and there's a couple of unique apps. There's a couple of unique apps from Samsung that's preloaded. But for instance, if you were to grab, or just look at the Gmail app, the Gmail app is the phone version instead of the 2-pane tablet version. that's why I think we think a lot of it as it's a phone going up to a 5.3 or 5.5 inch screen instead of a tablet coming down to that size. And then the other thing that I kind of have a theory about is that it's a very popular device, but Samsung's not saying where all those sales are happening. I think it's really popular among Asian cultures because the stylus makes it really easy to input their languages and their characters. That's not really, it's a lot harder to write in English on it with the stylus than it is, say, Korean or Japanese or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I don't get about the Note is I desperately want it to be awesome for a whole bunch of apps with stylus support. And every time I go and try it, it's just not there. And so maybe you're right that it's just like the default use case of it for inputting, language is what's making it so popular. But I have to disagree with you about the Nexus 7 running tablet apps because I use Nexus 7 every day and like 90% of the apps are basically just blown up phone apps. It's just less annoying because it's only a 7-inch tablet. Like Android tablet still just isn't there.
Yeah, I mean that problem is that, but that's an Android tablet problem. But like if you look at Google's apps, like the Gmail app, there's a separate tablet version versus the phone version because you get 2 panes with the tablet version, a little bit different UI that takes a better advantage of the larger screen.
Yeah, I wish they would do the same thing with their Google Reader app because oh my God!
No, Google Reader does have a different tablet UI than it does on the phone. If you flip landscape, you get a 2-pane view.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna try it.
No, I don't know if that's enabled on the Nexus 7.
You just got cert, Dieter. You just got cert.
Well, I always use it in portrait.
Right.
And it's completely annoying. I wish it had 2-pane in portrait because that's how I'd like to read because I need volume of headlines. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Note, it's just not a new thing anymore, right? And so I don't know if it's going to catch people's attention the way that the first one did against all odds. But, I have to, like I said at the outset, I have to admit that it could and that I'm, being a skeptic for skeptic's sake instead of not actually, believing. Do we want to talk about the S3 colors? I want to point out that the brown one looks really cool to me, and I totally would buy a brown Galaxy S3.
Yeah, I kind of love it.
As would I. Yeah, the brown is gorgeous. The brown is absolutely fantastic. So the only question is which U.S. carrier or carriers, plural, are going to carry which of those colors? Because I'm sure that there was some consternation on the part of Verizon and others that AT&T picked up an exclusive color. So I just wonder who's going to bite.
Yeah, I can't.
They got the red, right?
Yes, AT&T got the red. I could see a U.S. carrier picking up the black or the, what do they call it, graphite gray or something like that. I find it really hard to believe that any U.S. carrier is going to pick up the brown, as depressing as that sounds. I just can't see it.
Also, just to mention, there is no red Galaxy S3. I just want to get that on the record. There is a burgundy Galaxy S3, which is so glossy that I don't understand any self-respecting heterosexual male using it. It just looks like lipstick all over. But there is no red Galaxy S3.
Well, don't they call it garnet red or something?
Yeah, that's like, I mean, the brown is amber brown. Amber is not brown. They're just different colors, man. Get with the program. Also, I have no idea what the brown one looks like because I was on a flight when Samsung decided to announce this thing. So I'm just taking your word for it. It's gorgeous. So
it's a glossy.
I'll touch it tomorrow. I'm sure I'll touch it tomorrow somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for a matte one. Samsung needs to build a matte phone.
That would be wonderful.
Well, they should just sell the back plates individually, and they could mark it up 300%, and I would buy like 4 different colors. Just have a black front and then different colors for the back plate. I would be all over that, but they're never going to do it, and that's super annoying.
Are you talking about matte back plates?
Any back plates. But
I don't know.
Vlad
like
specifically
when you start mixing, see, this was what was great about dumb phones back in the day is that like the Nokia Express on covers, it would replace the entire case, and that entire concept is basically gone now, right? And I guess it's partially replaced by the fact that people just, the majority of people seem to get some sort of protective case with their phone, and that's what they use to customize and style their device. But if you want to style the case, it's like the actual phone case itself. That concept is just gone.
Well, apart from the Lumia 700, that was the latest
podcasted. Oh, sorry, Vlad. Some news broke. Looks like ISIS is going to be debuting its mobile payment solution in September. Possibly they're gonna introduce it in Salt Lake City and Austin, Texas next month, according to VeriFone CEO. So VeriFone is going to be providing the payment terminals, and it looks like they're definitely going to be requiring NFC, which is, I don't know. I feel like NFC shouldn't be a requirement for this sort of thing. There should be some sort of backup option, because there's just not that many NFC phones out there. But we're finally going to see ISIS actually happen. All these carriers working together. It's actually like a real thing.
I feel like we've been waiting for this forever.
We have been, but
Yeah.
I've been using Google Wallet. The latest version of Google Wallet on the Galaxy Nexus is good enough now, and you can add all your cards to it, so that it's I'm just happy with the way it works. I don't need anything else. I want everybody else to stop development efforts on mobile payments. I'm done. This is good. Everybody has a PayPass terminal. I have my phone. I'm happy.
Dude, you're one of like 80 people that lives that life. Nobody has Google Wallet. The few people that have access to Google Wallet on whatever their device is don't know that they can use it. It's like you are the 1% of the 1% that has a mobile payment solution that's reached some level of ubiquity and actually knows that they use it and actually uses it. It's like you and one other guy. That's it.
You're the other guy. You are the other guy, Dieter.
No, I'm not. I don't have Google Wallet on my phone.
But to Chris's point, if development ceased on the other things and, Google Wallet was able to be brought to more devices, then, more people would have it, instead of just kind of like this mishmash of various protocols and standards and all this other nonsense that, everybody wants to throw their hat in.
Yeah, we actually got an email to the mobile podcast email address, which is pretty amazing, mobile show at theverge.com, pointing out that NFC isn't actually necessary to mobile payments, that Apple's solution with Passbook. And we just heard, looks like NFC is not likely to get in the next iPhone, that there'll be some other, way of doing it, and that we don't need a single universal standard. We just need all the different standards to work together. And there's a little bit of hope for that, since there's that mobile payment committee that ISIS and Google Wallet and everybody else are all part of now. But I still am not optimistic it's going to happen, in short order. I think, we've talked about this a million times, and it's whatever Apple decides on, that's going to become the de facto standard. But I mean, Google Wallet is progressing. They, will let any card in now, and I guess they're going to add loyalty passes and loyalty cards and IDs and whatever to it. So it's opening up a bit to look a bit more like PayPass on iOS. So like these things are all starting to offer all of the features that they need to. The one feature that they don't have is anybody using them, except for Chris.
I'm using it, and that's all that matters.
There are mobile payment systems that are used like every day, all the time, but they're limited.
Square and Starbucks, right?
Yeah, Square and Starbucks. They're limited to those proprietary systems.
Right, and of course, in
guys,
Japan,
just
they have.
Call me when it's widespread, whatever it is, whether it's a mishmash like Visa, MasterCard. Just call me when it's widespread. I'll join in. Until then, it's just noise. It's corporate noise to me. Like, it'll make it work.
Call me when it will work on any phone without Verizon or some carrier or ISIS deciding which phones are going to have it. Call me when it's not a differentiating feature for a phone and when it's just the standard on a phone. When I buy a phone, I know that mobile payments will work on it, whether it's Android or iOS or Tizen or whatever.
Hopefully,
Peter, I will
hopefully you'll
do that,
never
but
buy a
I'm gonna
Tyson.
have to call you from Europe. If you don't want Verizon or AT&T involvement, it's gonna have to come from Europe.
Really, what we're waiting for is we're waiting for it to reach the Bluetooth ubiquity. Bluetooth is exactly the same on every single phone, no matter which one you buy these days.
Now, Vlad, I do want to point out that AT&T, because I've seen it on Google Street View before, AT&T, for some reason, has an office building in Belgium. I've seen it. And I feel like it's some sort of like super secret skunk works, like, all the stuff that they don't want anybody to know anything about, they do in Belgium, and then they import it to the US. But
I am happy to travel to Belgium to investigate that anomaly.
I mean, then again, Vodafone has an office in Silicon Valley, so I guess it's not that strange.
No, I think it's strange. I think I need to travel over there and try out some of the Belgian delicacies on my way there, and just, really dig into that story.
Sure. I think you have a report brewing. But no, I mean, mobile payments, I mean, we've talked about this ad nauseum over the past few months. But the problem with them, which is never going to really get resolved to anybody's satisfaction, is the fact that there are too many people who want their palms greased to make it happen, right? First and foremost, the carriers, which is why ISIS exists in the first place. ISIS would not exist if it were not for the fact that 3 of the 4 U.S. nationals believe that they are entitled to a percentage of this, what they perceive to be an entire new economy waiting to happen. In fact, really, they have absolutely nothing to do with it other than the fact that they are selling phones. So if it were up to me, carriers would not even, I mean, it's almost a net neutrality thing, right? Like, carriers really should have absolutely nothing to do with this. Mobile payment should be some secure hardware on the phone. It should be an app that you can download from any market, and that's it. There are enough people involved in making these transactions happen securely as it is without the carriers getting involved. So to me, ISIS is, like Vlad said, ISIS is noise, and they have absolutely no business being involved in this.
Next topic. I love that we close this one nicely. What's next up?
Sorry, I had to move and close the window. It is ridiculously, insanely hot in San Francisco today, and so I had the window open, and there is a truck backing up outside my building, which is in a perpetual state of construction, which is awesome. Next topic, we finally have got Nikon announcing the S800C, which is an Android-powered camera, and Samsung is also rumored to be introducing a Galaxy camera at IFA. And I am wondering why it's taken this long for this to happen. It seems like a really natural thing to just, have the cool photo apps that run on these platforms. Well, maybe not so much Android, but
I think I have the obvious answer, which is that with like proprietary firmware, camera manufacturers are able to. I mean, it's almost like the NASA argument, right? Where if you develop your own proprietary firmware, you can do it very tightly and in a very, very small amount of ROM, and the UI is fast. Exactly. It's what's the term? It's formally verified, so that you know exactly what's going to happen in every possible use case, because the firmware doesn't do that much. Whereas, with Android, it opens up a potential can of worms, and it becomes a much bigger project to test this firmware and test the camera in the same way and to the same degree that you would a traditional closed system. So I think
this Coolpix actually boots up into something proprietary so that it can just start taking pictures right away. While Android gets, finished loading in the background. So just in case Android is taking too long, it'll let you get your big pictures right away, and then it'll let you jump into Android specific stuff once it's ready.
And as clever as that is, it's kind of messed up that they have to do that.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But yeah.
But I mean, this was always the idea with Android, right? Like, it's an open system that anybody can use to slap into anything. We were expecting to see, consoles and cars and now cameras and I don't know, toasters or whatever running this OS because it's open source. You could just plug it into anything. And like, we really haven't seen it be like, it could have, replaced WinCE in some cases. I mean, I guess it's not really exactly the same thing as that, but I would have expected more consumer electronics to be running Android. Like, I'm still livid that there aren't a lot of very good aftermarket Android-based car stereos, for example. So, like, putting it in a camera makes really good sense to me, just because there are photo apps that you'd want to have direct access to a good lens, and so this makes sense. Like, I don't know if I'd buy this, but I buy into the idea of Android running on a camera. I mean, Dan, am I crazy? I mean, you're more of a camera dude than me.
No, I think that, just like you said, the idea is great. I don't know if this particular model is the answer. I feel like I would love to have this on a higher end camera, maybe, that, could really, a person that's using a higher end camera can maybe really take advantage of the connectivity of Wi-Fi and things like that, and the various Android apps that they could upload it to, a Dropbox account or something like that very quickly and easily if they're working with a team. Things like that really would make it quite awesome. Because when I look at this, like this particular device, you're paying $350 for a $150 camera to get the Android functionality, and I don't know how many people that would normally be buying this camera would buy into that.
Yeah, it feels to me like they were kind of hedging their bets a little bit and saying, well, we're gonna try this, but we're gonna start with a mid-range camera, and if it works out, maybe we'll expand it to the rest of the range. Because I totally agree, Dan. If they had been able to do this in a cool way on the P7700, then that would be a different story. But I don't know if you guys remember, Kodak tried to do something like this like a decade ago. They had they were using, there was a third-party company whose name escapes me that developed an open camera OS. And I think Kodak was the only major OEM to use it, but it had apps that you could install. It was like a whole thing. And it wasn't anything like truly open. It wasn't like an Android kind of thing, but it was a platform that you could actually pay to get access to the API with, and then you could develop apps for it. And it just kind of died off. But at the time, I thought it was a really cool idea for all the same reasons. You could have your own filters that you add and all these things. And now that the optics are so much better, the electronics are so much faster, I'm pretty excited about what this means for the future of cameras. And it really kind of validates the whole Nokia PureView way of thinking, which is that camera phones and point and shoots have gotten so close to converging on each other's territories that they're just about the same thing now. And the S800C is, it's for all practical purposes, it's a camera phone without the GSM radio, right? Which is what I've been saying over the past few weeks is what the PureView should have been. They should have just taken out the GSM radio.
Well, on that topic, actually, on that topic, Chris, somebody on Twitter a couple of months ago maybe pointed out to me that 2 years ago, while writing for Engadget, I wrote a post where I rather mockingly addressed what Anssi van Jockey, who was still one of the leading guys at Nokia, said. And he said that DSLRs are soon going to be obviated by camera phones. Which, 2 or 3 years ago, whenever that post went up and whenever Ansi's words were spoken, did seem like a really absurd thing to say. And I still feel like DSLRs have a role to play. Their sensor sizes cannot be duplicated. The 808 PureView tries, and look at how thick of a phone it is, even though, as you say, it's more of a camera than a phone at this point. But definitely, Anssi van Jockey's words were informed by the technology, the PureView technology, which we've now seen in the market way back then. And his vision is one that, as you say, Chris, a lot of people share, and a lot of people want to see come to fruition in some sort of admittedly compromised way, where you get something approximating DSLR quality while bringing it together with what Dan was saying, the app ecosystem of a fully developed software platform like Android. And this is something that has bugged me for the longest time, which is the camera software is just really, really dumb.
Oh, it's so bad.
There are two aspects of it. Like, one is there's the really clever stuff, which is autofocus and judging the proper distance and metering, which sometimes is really perfect and sometimes it's horrible again. So like these clever little automations of processes and the speed with which they're done, so that you press the shutter and all these automatic things kick off and do their job. Those are really like the indistinguishable from magic kind of software technologies that camera makers deserve great credit for. But then when it comes to the software that you interact with as a user, the UX of cameras, it is absolutely, utterly atrocious. And these displays that they've grown, they've increased in resolution, and it's just being wasted. I mean, we're looking at something that would be embarrassing for BlackBerry to tote out, just textual menus and then nightmarish, and they're written by people whose native language isn't even English. I mean, it's just a train wreck. It's horrible. And absolutely, Nikon has nothing to lose in just, dumping Android on one of its cameras and saying, hey guys, it's an Android camera. Honestly, I'm kind of disappointed in everybody else that they didn't beat Nikon to this, because this point and shoot that Nikon is bringing out is running gingerbread, and it's got pretty mediocre specs as far as the phone aspect goes. So, I mean, it doesn't excite me. As much as the idea of an Android camera phone excites me, this particular one doesn't.
Yeah, that's
the important thing is that there be APIs for all of these settings that you talk about. The camera needs to be open to having Android apps be able to adjust all the different settings that there are on a modern DSLR. And if someone were to just like publish a spec, we're not going to say like, here it is, it's Android, we slapped it onto a camera. But now here you can write an app. Here's all the stuff that we're opening up. We've done a couple of things. I think people would really go crazy on that, and you could write a lot of really interesting, apps to control the camera and do interesting things, as long as the Android OS has got full access to all the settings on the camera.
Yeah, and this is the
doubt
point.
Is going on here.
The only company at this point that can do this thing and do it justice, and I'm kind of surprised to be saying it, is Samsung. So this rumored Samsung camera phone with Android has good potential. And the reason for that is Samsung is already making lenses for its mirrorless cameras. So even though camera lenses are a really new thing for Samsung, the company is, it's partnered with some lens makers, some other optics makers. Can't remember the name of the company at this point, but it has some experience of building lenses, it has some experience of building cameras, and that experience is growing. And it absolutely has the hardware that can underpin a really, really appealing camera phone. But as I say, this Nikon one is great on paper, but it doesn't excite me as an actual product at the end. And there's just so much room for somebody to do something better and just like create their own market. Like this is what Apple does, right? Like there's room for a device, there's room for something new, and then Apple takes it and then suffocates the hell out of everybody else. But I really believe that Android is the great platform, the perfect platform to do this, which rules Apple out. And then Samsung is a big player, but then everybody else doesn't need to be sleeping. Like Sony has a press conference tomorrow. Why don't they give us one of these things? I mean, we're gonna go gaga. I know Ross Miller is just like, he's going to rip the shirt off his back. He's going to go nuts if Sony does something like this.
But do you remember, Vlad? I don't know. Well, any of you guys, I don't know if you remember this, but when Sony first debuted the Vita, which was not called the Vita at the time, it was whatever the original term for it was.
Next generation.
Yes, thank you. They said that or maybe this actually happened after that, but regardless, they said that they could repurpose the Vita OS for other devices. Now, I don't know if that philosophy or that guidance has changed as Sony has kind of metamorphosed in the past few months, but that's something to consider as well. I wouldn't be surprised to see Sony try to do something with, I'm sure that it continues to rub Sony the wrong way. I mean, Sony has always taken pride in creating its own proprietary, accessories and standards and platforms. Yeah. And I'm sure that they would love to get back to their former glory to the point where they can do that and get away with it. And maybe Vita OS is part of that strategy.
I think that's a long shot, but we could always dream.
Just real quick, I do want to point out that Sam Byford has put together a really nice roundup of all the next iPhone/iPhone 5 rumors, all in one place, so you can see everything: the larger screen, the smaller dock connector, the slightly changed design, all together in one place. And it's really funny that like we're talking about, IFA. We've got all these different announcements that are coming up. We've got a whole bunch of stuff next week already that we're going to have Motorola and Nokia. Oh my God. Yeah. Time is moving way too fast. And so we're sort of like just in the run up to this thing getting announced. But like, does anybody feel like there's something we don't know about the next iPhone at this point? Like, are there any, like, we know by and large what iOS 6 is going to look like. We've got enough parts leaks to put together a whole phone. We know that the screen and the dock connector, and like, I don't feel like there's anything that is going to really surprise me right now.
I mean, I would love
underestimating Apple.
The romantic tech nerd inside of me really wants to believe that Apple has been fleecing the entire world for the past several months and has been seeding us with fake parts and is going to just completely blow everyone away with some totally different design in September. But I just don't see how that's remotely possible. I think that the reality is that they have been thoroughly scooped and are probably not too happy about it and are kind of resigned to the reality that this is just how the world works now, and it is basically impossible to keep stuff secret.
And you know what that says to me? That says that the phrase "double down" officially means we're not going to do it. We're going to fail at it. Anytime anybody ever says I'm going to double down on X, what that means is I'm going to utterly fail to achieve X.
It's just like in real blackjack, where doubling down is very rarely the right move.
Wasn't it actually Mike Lazaridis who said RIM would double down? Like
everyone has said they are going to double down on something at this point.
Right, but so I love the idea.
Tim Cook said they double down on secrecy. I mean, it's like it's the kiss of death. If a CEO says double down, it's all over.
I just love the idea that Mike Lazaridis was the guy who set that tone. It would be so perfect if he was indeed the first CEO to start talking about doubling down, because what has followed since then is just excellent. It's just an excellent.
Who was it?
It was definitely John Rubinstein.
Was it him or was it what's his name? The other HP guy, the ex-Palm guy. No.
Oh, Bradley? Todd Bradley?
Yeah, Todd Bradley. One of those guys said that they were doubling down on Palm.
No, so, it was Mike Hurd. It was Mike Hurd. The guy who got fired.
Mark Hurd.
I think. Mark Hurd.
Yeah. Whatever. You could be right.
Either way,
regardless, the point is, it's the kiss of death.
Yeah. I guess as long as we're talking about Apple, we should also mention that they basically won the case against Samsung, the big court case in San Jose. There's of course other ones coming, and there's going to be an appeal, and there might be an injunction on the Galaxy S2. And we don't need to go deeply into this because there's a whole special edition Vergecast that was done basically live as the verdict was coming in. Actually, literally, like as the final verdict came in, they were already doing the podcast because there had to be a couple little corrections to it. But I mean, it's a mobile show. It bears on mobile. It's interesting. I think the fact that we're going to see possibly some injunctions on the Galaxy S2, that might be, a real world effect on this. But I mean, I think Samsung had already sort of changed its game. So I don't see this exact sort of case playing out again over and over and over again. With Apple just going after every Android manufacturer with the exact same stuff. I think that they felt Samsung was a special case.
Let me just note that we deserve special credit for going through most of this podcast without banging on and on about this lawsuit, because I pretty much guarantee you that makes us unique in this week's video, audio, any sort of industry commentary, because everybody has some sort of an opinion, some sort of an angle. I've actually read somebody write, it's too early to describe Samsung as clear-cut winners of this. Like, some people are so convinced that Samsung won just by being associated with Apple's products, which there's some validity in. For a lot of people, the effect of this lawsuit is going to be just glancing over the headlines and seeing that Samsung is having to pay damages for essentially copying Apple hardware. And a lot of people got to start doing the math in their head or doing the maths in their head for our UK listeners. And start thinking, hey, hang on a second. These guys are producing MacBook Airs and whatnot, and iPhones, slightly different, but not different enough not to be illegal. And they're cheaper than the iPhone. Why am I being ripped off by Apple? I'll just go and buy their cheaper stuff. But I don't know how much of an impact that's going to have on Samsung's business. I don't think that's going to be a significant impact. Also, I think to a great degree, it has been overblown, and there's been a great degree of overreaction to how much of an impact the ruling itself is going to have on Samsung's business. Because as you were just mentioning, if Apple gets an injunction against the Galaxy S2, what does that matter to Samsung? Samsung is heavily trying to sell and promote the Galaxy S3.
It hurts Boost Mobile, but
yeah, exactly. I mean, this is exactly what I'm saying. Samsung not selling any more Galaxy S2s from this day forth until the end of the world is not even going to be a rounding error, a currency.
I don't know if I fully agree with that though, because I think Samsung easily positions the Galaxy S2 as a entry level model compared to the Galaxy S3, just like Apple does with last year's iPhone 4 that's still selling for $100. If you look at the U.S. carriers, at least, every single one of them that carried the Galaxy S2 still carries the Galaxy S2, and they run deals where it's like buy one get one free, and it's $100 instead of being $200 or $250. So there's a huge market for that, $100 price point smartphone level. And if you're going to buy a Samsung smartphone,
and actually the other thing is like it would have been Samsung's high margin product. It's that they've been making it for a long time. It's the best selling Android variant and Android handset of all time, as far as I can tell. And so they would have been able to just, keep churning it out as, buy last year's model. It's still quite good, and it's, a little bit cheaper. But I mean, how much will it affect Samsung, in the US? Because I don't think the Galaxy S2 took the US by storm, because there are all these different variants. And so there was less of a cohesive sense of branding to it.
Maybe I pushed my point a little bit too far to the extreme, but the estimates are that the entire impact of the lawsuit, including the damages, including potential from lost sales due to a potential injunction from Apple coming further down the line in September, it would be something like 4% of Samsung revenue. That's how much of a ding Samsung might take. Whereas in the first day of trading, immediately after the judgment, Samsung stock price fell by 10%, which is, there's a potential impact, like at absolute max of 4% of the Samsung's annual revenue, whereas the company's entire price fell by 10%. So people clearly overreacted. And the other thing to say is, and somebody tweeted this, and it was pretty much perfectly spot on. And the tweet was, unlike everybody else on Twitter this weekend, I am not actually a patent law expert. Because everybody has some freaking interpretation and some freaking forecast about this thing. Whereas the only thing we really, really know for sure is that the lawyers on either side have won massively and will continue to win. Like, they'll have generations in their families secured because of this crazy, crazy lawsuit. But both Apple and Samsung.
My big question out of this is, what is Apple going to do with this? Does Apple think that it has like I don't know about a moral authority, but like if they've got what's the word with elections when someone wins by a landslide? They've got the people behind them. They've got a
mandate.
Edict. I'm so hopped up on Sudafed right now. I don't know the word I'm looking for.
Mandate.
A mandate. Like they have a mandate to go out and file similar lawsuits and go after everybody, or if this was sort of a one-off thing to set an example of Samsung, and they're going to deal with their other lawsuits with Motorola and HTC and whoever else it is that they're suing. But now that they've won this, they can start wrapping up and start getting the settlements in motion, and we can get back to business.
Apple will absolutely continue to pursue litigation against a variety of OEMs, leading eventually to Google proper ad nauseum. Mark my words. They are not going to stop. They are going to. I mean, they are taking Jobs' famous statement that he is going to spend every last dime of Apple's burying Android. They're taking that as gospel, and they're going to continue to pursue it doggedly to the ends of the earth. I'm absolutely convinced. And I'm not saying that I disagree. I mean, I think that Apple made many excellent points during this Samsung trial, and I can't say that I really agree with many aspects of the verdict. But that's not to say that every single lawsuit that Apple has filed around the world has been completely reasonable, and we don't know what forms those lawsuits are going to take going forward. By the way, I just want to point something out, which I don't think Apple realizes, and this just occurred to me, but I was doing some research while you guys were talking. The Droid Charge, the Samsung Droid Charge for Verizon is one of the devices that Apple is attempting to get an injunction against, which I mean, I don't even know if Verizon still sells the Droid Charge.
It's actually right on the front page of Verizon. If you go to Verizon's website, it was highlighted today.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's like free.
That's hilarious.
Free on contract.
They're trying to move stock before it gets injuncted.
Let me double check that, but yeah.
Well, so U.S. Cellular is really going to hate me for pointing this out, but the Galaxy S Aviator is basically the Droid Charge, and Apple failed to take notice of it. So Apple, just FYI, you might want to get an injunction against the Aviator as well, because the Aviator is definitely still very much for sale on U.S. Cellular.
Well, so I mean,
thank you, Chris.
If I'm Samsung, do I say, oh, well, I can't sell the Galaxy S2. I'm going to change one thing about it and give it another ridiculous, crazy name and start selling it again, and it'll take Apple 2 years to get around to getting an injunction on this. Like, that's one of the Apple's big complaints is like they hate doing these lawsuits because they can't, get them through the court system fast enough to have a real effect on sales, So I mean, like I just don't see Samsung significantly changing their game. I think they already have, and we saw it with the Galaxy S3.
Yeah, I think that long term it works out to a mandated royalty, right? Which is what, frankly, I've been advocating all along, where Apple's just going to continue, or potentially could continue to win these kinds of lawsuits for decades to come every few years, and they just pocket $1 billion or $2 billion, and it works out to being a forced royalty on these patents that they hold.
Well, let's also kind of try and differentiate and split them out a little bit. The first thing is that Samsung is ruled to have infringed on software patents on one side and on design rights on the other side. And the point that Dieter raised about let the Galaxy S2 rename it, give it a new design, and start selling it again. Well, if that,
I was being facetious with that, by the way. I was joking.
But that's fair enough, actually. Like if the Galaxy S2 offends the design rights of the iPhone and you tweak its design, where are you offending this time? Like that. I mean, Apple can't get this through the courts because then it's like, well, what are you suing for now? Now you're just suing for the fact that Samsung is selling phones which no longer look like your phone. But the more significant ones and the more intriguing ones, I think, are the software patents. Things like pinch to zoom. What was it? The bounce back when you're scrolling. And there was one other one. There were three major ones. 3 major software patents that Samsung was ruled to infringe.
Tap to zoom, bounce,
and pinch to zoom.
I'm forgetting the third. It might be, yeah.
It's not quite pinch to zoom. It's like the instance before you get to pinch to zoom, recognizing 2 fingers versus 1 finger, something like that. Nilay can explain that way better than I can, but it's not. Nilay is very adamant in saying that it's not pinch to zoom, but it's one of the steps before pinch to zoom.
And I'm very adamant in saying I really don't give a no, but seriously, it's like on the one hand, I feel like these things shouldn't be patentable at all, and I know there are countries that don't have software patent systems in place at all, and for whatever reason, software is still being made in those countries. Like people must be crazy or hooked up on something. But okay, so that's one aspect. But then on the other hand, I just kind of feel like, well, you know, things like pinch to zoom or the moment before pinch to zoom, that moment of anticipation can be recreated in other ways. And the perfect example for me is the scroll back bounce, right? The one that you have so familiar in iOS. Yes, it works great and it looks great and it's really functional, but there are so many other ways in which you can be creative and inventive and not copy it. And a great one for me, and this is probably the only thing I'm going to praise about HTC Sense 4, is the way that HTC does it there. And it's the same way that Sony does it with the PS Vita. It's just the way that the items on the screen, the list items just kind of stretch out and then they just collapse again, kind of in an accordion sort of way. It's very natural, it's very instinctive, and it conveys the exactly same point.
And,
so if you can achieve the exact same thing,
Windows Phone does that as well.
Right. I love the way Windows Phone does it. The squish.
Right, and Windows Phone does it, squishing rather than pinching. It's a crazy conversation we're having. But yes, you can convey the same message but differently, and that's the whole point of creativity.
Well,
so even though I hate the software patent system, I just feel like these companies are being lazy if they are literally just going to copy Apple.
Well,
just do something different.
If you look at the grid, we had a post earlier today about the changes that Samsung's making to the software of the phones that are supposedly infringed or have been found to infringe. And if you look at the grid of the patents that were infringed, there are certain phones that infringe all 3 software patents, and then like a slightly newer phone that doesn't infringe any of them because Samsung had already worked around and figured out a workaround for the bounce back and this pre-pinch to zoom and the double tap to zoom. So there's definitely, like you were saying, there's definitely workarounds available. And on those devices where the workaround was implemented from day one, I don't recall anybody complaining from the phone's launch that it didn't have those particular features exactly the same as an older Samsung phone. Maybe the bounce back certain people didn't miss that, but I don't think the other ones were terribly missed.
Yeah, I will say that HTC's workaround in Sense 4 for the bounce, I just can't stand it. Where it separates all the items in the list, like the kind of accordion down, and then they can reconnect back up together. I never liked it. It always looked terrible to me.
I don't mind it.
I like the Windows Phone one the best. That's my favorite, the squish.
Yeah, Windows Phone looks good. Even stock Android, the way it does it with like the
glow.
You know, the glow.
I don't like that because it feels like you're coming to a hard stop. Like you're scrolling and then wham.
It's less tactile.
It's like hitting a wall
with the glow. Yeah, you're scrolling and like where you move affects what's happening on the screen, and then all of a sudden that stops working. It's like what? So I mean, Apple's implementation of it is really, really good, and so you can see why it's tempting to copy it because it lets it still feel tactile, but also like it shows you it's at the end. And so, I mean, the way Android does it with the glow is fine. It's just sort of aggravating. If the glow should like grow down as you move your finger, so there's still some tactile response or visible response.
If you really love that bounce back feature, ironically, the Firefox browser for Android, whatever the latest versions are, has bounce back all over it. No matter if you're running on ICS or Jelly Bean or an older version of Android. Yeah, and I have no idea how Mozilla gets away with that because it's like very obvious bounce back and to the side and everything like that. It's just something I observed.
Yeah, I haven't used Firefox on mobile in a long, long time. So maybe I'll check it out. Do we want to talk about these? There's a couple. We usually skip these like Company A patented feature X, and what does it mean? Because you never really know how long it'll be before a patent turns into something. But Nokia got a couple of patents on designs that look like unreleased Nokia phones, basically. There's the Lumia Arrow, which looks like a mid-range or maybe a low-end phone. Looks basically like an iteration on the 610. And then there's the Phi, or is it the Phi? Phi. How would that be pronounced?
I imagine Phi.
Phi.
Right.
Probably Phi.
Yeah.
Which looks like basically a very slightly iterated version of the 900. Is it even an iterated? Yeah, it's a slightly iterated version of the 900.
Most importantly, it has the curved glass on the edge.
Does it?
Yeah.
Yes. And that is big.
Wow.
People are anticipating it to be 4.7 inches in size. So like a big one.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem that Nokia is going to have here, as much as I continue to love this industrial design, this design DNA for them, the problem they are going to have with consumers is that they have now been exposed to the 900 in the US. I'm talking about, of course. They've now been exposed to the 900 for several months. This new device is going to come in, say, October, November, somewhere in that time frame. It's going to be on AT&T shelves, looking basically the same as the 900. How do you convince people who've been around the AT&T portfolio for a while that this is a genuinely and thoroughly new device? I don't know how you communicate that to them.
Well,
tiny tiles, man. Tiny little tiles. Oh, wait, no, that'll look like that on the current phones as well.
Apple's got the same problem between the 4 and the 4S. I mean...
Yeah, but the difference is that every single person, tech savvy or not, in the United States knows exactly what iPhone is. I mean, I get text messages from my least tech savvy friends who I can make fun of on this show because they definitely don't listen to me. I get text messages from them saying, when is the next iPhone coming out? Because they know, like, iPhone is pop culture, right? It's not even tech anymore. It's just pop culture. That is not true. So Chris, Nokia does not have that same advantage.
Little point of order, since we've got into the judicial sphere today. Earlier on, you said, mark my words. I don't think we need to do that because you marked them yourself.
What?
Hanging on the table.
Oh, yes, this is true.
Yeah.
Yes.
But besides that, I mean, perfect example for exactly what you're saying, Chris. On my flight over from London today, some guy dropped his phone on the takeoff and it rolled back. And this girl tried to pick it up, but it kept rolling back and it rolled all the way to the air hostesses. And she said to him, he was about to get up while the plane was taking off. She said to him, no, it's fine. They have your iPhone. And it struck me that she didn't say they have your phone. Like, she just saw a rolling thing falling down the aisle and she knew that it was an iPhone. And that's exactly to your point. It's beyond just being a brand and beyond just being Apple's product. It's a thing now. It's like a whole other category of phone. So yes, just because it looks like the old iPhone doesn't really matter to Apple, but it might matter to Nokia if people can't differentiate.
Yeah, I can see that point.
I think it matters more to Nokia than it does to Apple, for the reasons you guys have all stated, basically. Now, what they can do is offer some hot new colors. Give me my orange.
A brown.
Man, I'm telling you, my burnt sienna.
Orange would be hot.
Yeah, orange would be pretty great.
I would even take the amber brown. I forget what the color was of the brown Samsung. Actually, no, a brown Lumia 900 would look pretty terrible. Now that I think about it,
it would. The only way brown works is if it's double shot, like the old Zune, or if it's. I mean, they can do something like with the brushed look or something. But yeah, matte brown is just not good.
It would look like
not good at all.
A chocolate bar,
yeah.
But on that topic, the leak for this Nokia Phi was of it with a yellow outfit.
Yep.
And we've already discussed the whole Nokia being inspired by the CMYK color palette and the fact that it already has cyan, magenta, and black phones. Doesn't have a yellow one. Why doesn't it have a yellow one? Yada, yada, yada. But the latest leak, the one that we've seen and the one that seems to have been confirmed by everything since of the Nokia Phi, was it with a yellow outfit. So if you're into yellow, you can get excited.
Yellow's great. I'm in.
We will find out on the 5th. And that will be, but the main event on the 5th, we talked about this last week, is Motorola. We're expecting, the RAZR HD, basically. But then there's also now this RAZR M, which is like a mid-rangey kind of RAZR. But it's QHD, man. At 4.3, that's low end.
That's terrible.
That's pretty ugly.
What's interesting
that's pretty ugly.
is it's Super AMOLED, which makes me think that it's probably the same Super AMOLED screen that was in the RAZR and the RAZR Max, which was
is a terrible display.
Yeah, absolutely awful display. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm using it. Stop hating on it.
You're still
How long
using
has
it,
the battery
Vlad?
lasted? Have you
I'm
charged it
still
since
using
we
the
last
RAZR
spoke?
Max, dude. The RAZR Max with ice cream sandwich and that crazy battery is it's a killer phone for a trade show like this, because I can't rely on the One X to last me the full day. Whereas with this thing, I can rely on it to last me tomorrow.
There's something to be said for that.
You can't compete with that. I mean, it's a bad display, yes, but I can read stuff on it. That will do. That's fine.
Yeah, I am jealous of that battery. And then the other mid-range phone that we had rumored, actually more than rumor, this is exclusive to us, was the HTC Proto. Chris, you want to talk about this?
I would be honored and delighted to talk about the HTC Proto. So this is a device that bears a striking resemblance to a phone that HTC released earlier this year in China. We wrote about it. Richard Lai of Engadget China, Chinese, is actually the one who pointed this out to me. It's the T something 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 W, and I wish I had a link to give you guys right now. I don't. But point is, this phone already exists in China. It looks like they're expanding its scope globally. May or may not be known as the Desire X at this point. We're not sure, but it's very much a mid-range phone, kind of in the same vein as the One V, but without the chin and with slightly upgraded specs. Looks like we're looking at a 1 gigahertz dual-core Snapdragon S4. You know, like the S4 range is very, very broad, and this is on the lower end of the S4 line, but Qualcomm does technically categorize it as an S4, so that's an upgrade from the single-core 1V. This isn't going to replace your One X, but it's a pretty smart-looking phone. So we'll have to see how it actually. I'm guessing that we're going to see this at IFA, and if not, then shortly thereafter.
Sorry, I was just. It's the new Desire V. That is what they call it in China, aka the HTC VT T328T for China Mobile.
Rolls right off the tongue.
That's sexy.
Yeah, rolls right off the tongue. Yeah.
I will say I'm a big fan of the vertical HTC logo on the side of the phone instead of just centered in the middle. I think that looks a lot cooler.
Yeah.
Much more in fitting with their aesthetic, I think.
Yep.
Great. Exciting. Woohoo.
So Vlad, get ready to see that one in the next day or two, I suspect.
Yeah, this is what I'm going to do. When we do a video hands-on, that's how I'm going to kick it off. Yay! Mid-range.
Yep.
Android.
Yep.
Again.
Yeah.
It's not
That's how
stuck.
it's done.
10-second hands-on video and just stare at the camera. It's not stuck. Why do you do this to me?
Stop. If I laugh, I'm going to hawk up a lung right now. Okay. With that, I think it's time to end the Verge Mobile Show. It has been lovely having you all with us. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can. We are at Verge. I am at Backline. Chris is at ZPower. Vlad is at Vlad Savov. And Dan, it was amazing having you with us. And as DCSIEFERT.
SEIFERT. So close.
EI.
Yeah.
Dang it. Say it again so everybody can get it right.
It's DCSEIFERT.
EI. You know, it's because my name is IE, and so I always get mad when people spell it wrong, so I just assume. We'll be back next week. Vlad will have survived IFA. Good luck to you, Vlad. Thanks so much for watching, everybody.
One second.
Oh.
Hold on. I mean,
we're holding on.
Oh, okay. Just to justify this interruption, I'm going to say beta. So yay, enjoy that. But also, I just want to talk up the fact that I would like our loyal listeners to please tune in tomorrow, because myself and Ross Miller are going to be live blogging our little hearts out. We've got a Sony press event at 4 p.m. Berlin time, which works out to 10 a.m. Eastern in the United States. And then 2 hours after that, we've got Samsung Mobile Unpacked, Galaxy Note 2 action, which is right at noon Eastern, 6 p.m. Berlin time. So tune into the site at that time. We'll have the live blog. We'll have pictures. We'll have videos. We'll say things in funny accents. There'll probably be beer. It'll be great.
Yeah, the Samsung Unpacked events are always completely insane, and so you definitely are going to want to see what Vlad and Ross have to say about the madness that's occurring in front of them.
It's true.
Well, now I don't have a well-rehearsed scripted wrap-up thing, and so all I can say is goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Awkward.
Bye.